Who doesn't love a good story? I'm sure most of you will say you do, but I want to introduce you to Africa's biggest story enthusiast. And I have it on good authority that the lady you see on the screen is actually me, Hannah H. Tarindwa, possibly Africa's biggest story lover. I love stories in the morning, I love stories in the evening, I love stories in the afternoon. I love stories so much, I think I'm going to die watching this beautiful story and refusing to wake up in my sleep. But why are stories important? Why should they matter to me? And why should they matter to you? Well, you see, stories of the past remind us of who we are and where we come from, and why we are the way we are today. And stories of the present, well, those ones reflect on things that are happening to us, or things that we wish would happen to us in our present time. Then there's stories of the future, my type of stories. These stories are the ones that show our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations, and also warn us of how things may turn out if we continue with certain behaviors, whether good or bad. And so, as a lecturer of journalism, I asked 100 of my students what they think are the themes in most stories, and not just stories, stories that are on feature films. And my students gave me positive themes and negative themes. Of course, they came up with the first theme of love. Needless to say, my students love romantic comedies, they love romantic dramas. So of course, that's the theme that stuck out for them in movies. And then the second theme they came up with was the reflection of social realities, movies that talk about what is happening in the world currently, whether good or bad. But they thought it was a positive theme because it really shows the world what's happening. And then, one of my favorite type of themes, overcoming challenges. Now, these are the movies you watch where there's an underdog, and this underdog struggles with some, problem that they have, and they fight against it, they walk through this journey, and then eventually they come up on top. People love such stories of the underdog becoming a victor. And then the stories that warn society. For example, stories about environmental degradation or the takeover of artificial intelligence if we don't watch our computer literacy. And then, of course, my favorite type, linked to the futuristic stories, hopes and dreams and aspirations. Unfortunately, not all feature films are feel-good when it comes to their themes. And my students went on to identify negative themes, the first one being revenge as a solution of injustice. I'm sure right now, if any of you in the audience has their relative, mother, father, brother killed because of a certain movie that you've watched, you are going to start eating more, jogging more, preparing to revenge and kill the person as soon as you meet them. Because that's what movies show. And then, the early sexual orientation of children. Unfortunately, even in animation feature films, you find that children are being taught about sex at a very young age. I remember when I was young, watching a kiss on TV was taboo, but you now find kisses in almost every other feature film for children. Then, cultural imperialism. Now, you find this, that in many feature films we watch across the world, there's this one big brother who, if aliens come to the world, they are there for the rescue. If a disease is around the world, they are the ones who are going to find it. So, subconsciously, we begin to think that this culture is the best culture for us. We should dress like them, walk like them, talk like them. And of course, glorified violence. I'm sure if I was to show you a clip of someone chopping off another person's head, none of you would flinch. Blood is no longer something we are afraid of or we're disgusted by, because many movies are about that. Actually, recently, I talked to a friend who said, I asked him, what sort of movies do you like? He said, I like action as long as there's guns blazing and people dying. What? But you see, these positive and negative themes are themes for blockbuster movies. And when I say blockbuster movies, no one actually thinks of African feature films, because Africa's feature films are different. And I asked my students, what do you guys think are the major themes for African feature films? And they came up with some interesting themes, the first one being our colonial past. So they feel that in the movies that are made in Africa have a lot of apartheid, slavery, colonization, and it's a recurring theme in African movies. And the second one, of course, is corruption, where you've got a big guy with a big stomach coming out of a nice Mercedes-Benz with this lady who's got heavy makeup, nice nails, and frowns upon everybody. And then the third one, that if you don't have it in an African feature film, it's not quite enough. Witchcraft, oh. If you don't have a witch in an African movie, what's the point of watching it? And linked to that, animosity. It seems Africans hate each other. We're willing to take up AK-47s, kill each other, slap each other, backbite each other. It's not a real African feature film without that. But of course, the ultimate African feature film has to have a lion, a giraffe, a hippo, some sort of safari traveling, so that you really feel, yes, this is an African feature film. But are these our stories? I know if I go into a safari, I also feel like a tourist. And that shows that there is a problem. And what is the problem? Now, the problem comes from two factors, external and internal. The first one, the external one, is the colonial mentality. This is from people from outside Africa still feel that we need to be fed their stories. We prefer outside stories. Is that true? The second one, of course, is the political economy of the film industry. Right now, if we were to go online and find the statistics of the top 5 filmmakers in the world, none of them are African. And so even if we wanted to make the films, the best quality is not found on this continent. And thirdly, we are still viewed as the primitive other. I don't know how many of you are in the crowd are of my generation, but when I say the gods must be crazy, it is still deemed as the best African movie out there because it shows us living in trees, taking roots as medicine. And these external factors have actually affected the internal factors. We ourselves as Africans, we are afraid and we compare ourselves. We say, no, look, our African movies are not as good as the other movies. So we can't really tell stories the way they do. And the second is the lack of shared values. We don't have values that are running from Cape to Cairo, from Lagos to Nairobi, whereby all Africans share a certain value. And this might seem contrary to what I'm saying, but the third point is also acceptance of our differences. There are 3,000 languages on this African continent. And yet, if we were to go through all of the movies that have been made across, there's some languages which have never been heard on the big screen. Why not? There are movies from other continents that we see, they speak their own languages and they put translations. Why can we not do the same here in Africa? And then documentaries. Endless documentaries from Africa. Can we not also share interesting fiction stories which reflect our reality? This needs to change. And it's time that we change that narrative. And I believe everyone in the audience, present or otherwise, can do that with these 3 solutions. The first one being, we need to establish a proudly African agenda. It's time we look in the mirror and love ourselves. From Cape to Cairo, love ourselves, accept ourselves and our differences, as well as our similarities. And then, after we have that Cape to Cairo African agenda, we move into investing in storytellers. As the founder of the Writers Academy of Namibia, I believe there are stories out there to tell. At the Writers Academy, we have actually seen stories that people are telling, and we are always surprised. But unfortunately, there are no writers' schools around. There are no places where writers can go and camp and be taught the art of storytelling, which can be translated to feature films. So we need that sort of investment in our own storytellers. And how does that happen? Through intersectoral support. We need governments and private people to come together so that this can happen. We have 300,000 millionaires on the continent, and people who have beautiful houses, people who can afford to give us cameras, a pen, a paper, a computer, for someone to write a script and make their story known to the world. And what happens if these three are taken into consideration? We have the transformation I want to talk about, unlocking value. There are people right now, like this auntie here, who are actually telling stories in small, dingy rooms, and no one knows them. And yet, they are rich in their style of storytelling. We also have young men who are dancing on the streets, entertaining the few people who pass by, and then afterwards they go home to share a Coke and a loaf of bread. We also have the film industry will not only benefit people who are talented, even people from other industries will be able to benefit from this. We need people to build the studios that we're going to do. We need technicians, we need doctors, and they can actually work in the feature film industry. When this is done, the song of unemployment can go down. Now, we have so many graduates in Africa who at the moment, all they do after 2 years of sitting at home, they decide, why not just join the market? Why not go sell tomatoes or second-hand clothes like other people do? A lot of talent here in Africa is there and not being exposed. Another transformation that can happen is that a little child's dream can become reality. We can have children who want to do film directing. There is potential in front of the camera as well as behind. And then, my favorite transformation is that we can have a sense of African pride. I will not ever forget the day I heard that Tsotsi was having an Academy Award nomination, and had friends in America who were calling me, Hannah, do you know this movie? It's called Tsotsi. I said, yeah, I know it, I heard. And they were like, yeah, what does Tsotsi mean and what language is it? And I told them, well, it's not just in one language. It's in Shona, Ndebele, Zulu, Xhosa, and Tswana. What does it mean, Hannah? They kept bugging me, and I told them, it means thief. And they were eager to learn and watch, but I will never forget the sense of pride I had for my continent. Oh, but the pride was elevated when I watched Black Panther. And there it was, Namibia, in the hairstyle. And I kept telling people, do you know that's not a fake hairstyle? They didn't create that. That's from Namibia. Those are our Himba people. And people were like, is it real? I said, come to Africa and see. They were mind blown. And in addition, we can have positive African role models. Right now, if we want to make a big movie about any of our African icons, they borrow people from other continents who come and learn our accents. And most of the time, they don't get them quite right. But imagine seeing your auntie, your uncle, your churchmate, your schoolmate work in front of a big screen. Even if someone is a producer behind the camera, I'm sure you're all going to be bragging, yeah, I go to church with that person. Because you have positive African role models, people you can talk to, people you can actually ask, how did you make a film? And they can inspire you. But more than anything, I believe it's time we have authentic African storytelling. Right now, I'm sure some of you in the audience are thinking, wow, she has a very good accent. She was probably born outside the country, lived in England for a while. But I just want to tell you, I am 100% Southern African, born and raised and educated here. You see, everybody thinks that I should have an accent like this, because this is the sort of African accent that I should have. If I don't sound like this, I'm not quite African. But I am 100%. And that's what we need, African authenticity. I'm not saying this accent is not there. It is there, but it's not in Southern Africa. And it's time we hear and see our own people for what we are, celebrating the diversity that I spoke about. If all this happens, I firmly believe that we can have a transformation of self and society. Our children can be proud to have their natural hair, all types of natural hair. And they can be themselves in public and in private. And our storytellers, such as myself, will not have to stand in corners shouting to just a few people. Those people can actually be multiplied by seeing and hearing our stories on the big screen. And what happens when people watch movies? Their dreams can be turned to reality. If a feature film industry is built, instead of imagining what it would be like to be a camera person, to be a media guru, to be a production team, these dreams can come true. And I believe that if we actually develop the feature film industry in Africa, we believe we can make a sustainable future. There are so many wars and cries for unemployment, and I strongly believe that if we have the feature film, we are opening up an industry that is largely ignored, $1 billion industry. And it's not only going to benefit the people within the industry. Someone can watch a film and aspire to be more than what they ever thought they could be. A female astronaut from Africa, or a doctor. Because when people imagine themselves as something, most likely they become it. And so, yes, I've declared myself the biggest story lover in Africa. But I believe that if all of us come together, then you and I, all of us can be Africa's biggest story lovers. Join me.